Good morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night. So let's just take a minute to really arrive, to really settle. To be here. To be here in a very open here. To be now, in a timeless now. To be in our body that is so open, we can't say where it ends. So something else is interesting is happening right now, which is we are attuning as a group. Even though we're all in our individual spaces, there is a shared heart and a shared ground. I invite you to sense it. This sensing, this intuition is not from the ordinary mind, not from thinking. Good. Just wanted to bring the sense of connection as we start. And another way to do that is to, as we've done before, is to go to the chat function and just write your name and where you're from and anything you'd like to briefly share with the group. And we'll just take 3 minutes or so to have a look as people check in. That's right, it's the first day of spring, isn't it? I was out pulling weeds in my garden a little while ago. They're definitely coming up. Okay, good. Nice to see all of you. I know some of you are also part of my 9-month retreat. So I saw you yesterday too. Welcome. So today I wanted to do a shorter guided meditation, a bit longer talk than last time. I looked at the recording last time and realized I spoke very little, and thought I would fill out some of the holes this time. We'll take a break and then break into 2 stems or 3 stems with the dyadic inquiry about our deepest ground, and come back and have a conversation. So we could say we have a lot of ground to cover. Not a very good joke. Okay, so we'll sit and meditate for about 10 minutes. Eyes closed or slightly open, as you prefer. A few deep, slow breaths. Letting the eyes relax. Forehead, sometimes called the factory of thought, can be offline. No problem to solve right now. And let your attention drop down and in. No efforting. Down and into the core of your body. Feel your heart area. The depth of the heart. And then the lower belly. Sometimes it can help to put your hand or hands over this area as a kind of reminder. As if you're breathing from the lower belly. Feeling your pelvis and lower legs and feet. Your connection with the earth. And imagining that you can breathe up from the earth through the bottoms of your feet. And then exhale down. Let the exhalation completely empty. And as you do so, just open to the sense of the underground. Again, no efforting. Let it come to you as you breathe. Just letting your attention fall, be taken. And I invite you to feel yourself held, supported. As you open to this actually infinite depth of the ground. And to trust. And also opening to the recognition that you are not separate from this ground, holding ground. You are both held and holding. And to be the ground. This open, infinite, luminous darkness. This vibrant stillness. This spacious solidity. Nothing to hold on to. No need to hold on. Nothing to grasp. No need to grasp. Nothing to refuse or resist. a willingness to be completely emptied. Of all your stories and images. And then to be filled with an essential aliveness. A willingness to rest in and as your deepest knowing. To rest in and as your inner authority. An authority that does not assert nor deny. One of the interesting things about this exploration into what it is, what our true nature is we grow increasingly intimate with ourself, whatever that is. And as we do so, we become intimate with all things. Like it's the same shared essential nature, the same shared heart, the same shared clarity, love, and ground. We can certainly feel it as the heart awakens. We feel the depths of the heart open and this remarkable sense of non-separateness, wholeness and non-separateness can begin to emerge. And another facet of this is the opening of the ground. This is even a deeper, quieter level. This is not just of the mind and of the heart, of thought and of feeling, but this is instinctual and often unconscious, largely unconscious. I've reflected over the years on the developmental process, just the human developmental process, and it seems to be a bottom-up process. First, there's an instinctual development in the infant, and then a beginning of emotional maturity and development, and finally cognitive. So it's kind of a development bottom up. And very often this inquiry and discovery starts, cognitively, goes into the level of feeling, and then begins to penetrate and suffuse the instinctual level. And I think this is why it's less articulated, less well understood, less conscious, and it's a denser, unconscious area of conditioning. So it's not unusual at all we explore more intimately our experience, we come to a knot in our gut. Has anyone felt that? Hands up, thumbs up. We have a few knots in our audience, right? Well, me too. I'm no exception, right? There's a grip here. There's actually several grips, but there's like one big grip here. And it has to do, as I've mentioned, and I want to reiterate this because it's just so basic. There is a fear of losing control. You with me on this one? We all have it as human beings. What are we trying to control? Everything. Everything. Everyone. Especially ourselves. And why? Because we fear annihilation. I want to put it very simply and very starkly. There is an underlying fear of annihilation. The word annihilation has its root in the word nihil. In Latin, it means nothing. It is the fear of being nothing. And there are different levels of this fear. One we could call psychodynamic, which refers to our specific psychological conditioning. And another level is existential. All of us share as a human being, regardless of our specific conditioning. So all of this can sound very psychological, maybe inappropriate for a spiritual conversation. Obviously, I don't believe that. Reason being, the people that I've worked with over decades, again and again, in their process of opening, becoming more alive, more authentic, more real, more connected, closer to who they really are, inevitably encounter this territory. And very often have been resisting it their whole life. And so their spirituality remains shaky, lacking a foundation, fragile, and they find themselves again and again, even when there have been substantial awakenings of the head and the heart, thrown off, hijacked, if you will, by this unconscious conditioning, which is instinctual, which is so often revolves around the fear of losing control and of being annihilated in some way. In what ways? And I'm going to just kind of give a brief description of this territory, and you just kind of feel, we all have our little variations on this. So just kind of feel what's true for you. Because as we open and deepen, this material gets flushed out. And it's valuable, it's really valuable to recognize the pattern. And in the seeing of the pattern, in the welcoming of the pattern, and I'll talk kind of the second part of my talk, I want to accent that in terms of being with our experience, in the seeing and seeing through of the pattern from really the eternal now, from openness, from presence, that very seeing through allows a natural release to happen. This is how letting go happens, not by effort. Not by effort, but a natural release that comes from seeing and seeing through, feeling and feeling through, sensing and sensing through whatever is here. So on a psychodynamic or, kind of personal psychology level, if we have experienced trauma, as many of us have, either individual incidents or chronic, this leaves a deep imprint in the body somatically and in the mind, subconsciously and consciously. And in the opening process, you know, because it was so overwhelming to the system, we had to deal with it some way. We had to distance from it, perhaps severely, which we call dissociation. We leave the body, or part of us does. There are subtleties and complexities here. We compartmentalize this area that feels chaotic and overwhelming and put it away so that we can get on with our life. And so as a system begins to open and awaken, this material comes into the foreground and is wanting to be met with love and understanding. That's trauma. Also, there's early bonding issues, what are called attachment issues that we have with our primary caretakers. If our primary caretaker, usually a mother, but whoever is in that role, has been distracted and overwhelmed by his or her own conditioning, that's transmitted to the child. Right? A sense of unsafety, for instance, a sense of not being seen or misseen, neglected, or possibly abused, or used in some way to fulfill holes in the primary caretaker's own psyche. And a child, extremely sensitive to the primary caretaker, adjusts and distorts themselves in order to stay connected in some way and to survive. So if the primary caretaker has really been unavailable for her or her reason, his or her reasons, there can be a sense of profound abandonment and a terror of that will come up in our adult relationships. A fear of getting close, because if we do, someone may leave, right? A fear of rejection and abandonment. It may come as a fear of attack. If I open up, you know, I will get annihilated. So I need to withdraw, right? I need to shield and armor myself. It can be a fear of engulfment, of being taken over, swallowed by a primary caretaker's needs, so that we feel like we're actually being smothered to death. And any kind of closeness then can feel like that. It can feel like it gets so chaotic, we're going to fragment and die just because of the chaos in the system and the lack of soothing and a lack of stability. Maybe some of you can relate to different aspects of these. Sometimes there's different aspects of this. And trauma can be chronic and developmental. In other words, very often the two go together. This difficulty in having a secure attachment or bond along with trauma. All of this affects the nervous system, the body, the psyche, our relationships, our way of being in the world. And we project this onto the world, okay? And we make a story and hold ourselves somatically in this self-world view. So if we let go, it can feel like we're facing death. You with me? You have a sense of this? And we feel terrified. This is the right word. I mean, we may feel anxious, yes, but this material is terrifying. Our very survival feels at stake if this is exposed, if this is opened up. And it's, as I said, projected onto the world. The world looks like it's abandoning or attacking or engulfing. And we have to navigate that hostile world in some way, either by being aggressive or armored or pulling back, hiding, right? In order to be safe. And as that happens, attention, we contract and attention comes up and we become vigilant, scanning, particularly human faces, right? We look for signs of who's trustworthy and who's not. We're looking for attack or rejection. So many, I mean, this material, for those of you who've been in psychotherapy or are psychotherapists, is very familiar. For people who are spiritual teachers and they don't know this material, they can't track and help their students, either because they don't know it, they've been exposed to it and don't know it within themselves, or they simply are not educated to deal with it. And so there's a feeling of stuckness, feels like the whole process of opening up just grinds to a halt. So it's important to understand this material and to be able to approach it with sensitivity and understanding and patience and courage, because this process is a process of turning toward that which we have avoided our whole life, facing actually what feels most difficult and threatening. So I wanted to lay this out, I mean, this is the psychological conditioning. Then our existential conditioning is we're always dealing, if we take ourselves as a limited body mind, we're always dealing with the threat of life and death. Death, certainly, right? But also, interestingly, a fear of life, a fear of the unknown. Regardless of our conditioning, even if we've had a secure attachment and relatively little trauma, existentially, as a separate self and someone identified as just this body mind, we are aware of impermanence. We are aware of loved ones, losing loved ones. As children, it may be pets, it may be parents, maybe grandparents. As adults, it may be siblings and parents and grandparents. In other words, we see it all around us, don't we? Impermanence, the disappearing of beloved forms. Events happening that we did not imagine could happen. A global pandemic, a stage 4 diagnosis out of nowhere. If we take ourselves as a separate self, in our little silo, separate from everything, we live in existential terror on some level. If we know this particular form, our form, this name and form, this body, this experience that we've had, is actually part of a greater whole, like the tip of a wave, and that we are also the ocean, there's a deep relaxation that happens. Death is not an enemy. Change is not an enemy. Life is not an enemy. So this is the level that we're dealing with as our exploration deepens. So how do we know, how can we sense how grounded and ungrounded we are? Last week, you were sitting with a question in dyads, how is it that I resist opening to my deepest ground? And, we didn't have much time to share as a group what came. It's a really interesting inquiry, I think, and one to continue to sit with, because there are various ways that many are subtle, some are unconscious, in which we resist opening to our ground. Because in opening to our ground, our deepest ground, we are opening to life. We're opening to reality, to death, to life, and everything in between. So how do we know if we're being ungrounded? Well, one way to check easily is to notice where your attention localizes. Check right now. Where does my attention localize? Most of us, it localizes here. And if it's localized here, we are ungrounded. Okay? To a very varying degrees. And everything that comes with living up here, that is to say, lost in our thinking, daydreaming, we're ungrounded. Projecting, we are ungrounded. Judging ourselves or others, we are ungrounded. Comparing ourselves to others, we are ungrounded. Have you noticed whenever you get caught in those kind of cycles, that's what happens? You kind of go into a virtual mental state. You actually, and if you notice physically what happens, you're up here, right? I say you, we are up here. I'm speaking, as what we do as human beings. I would say for many years, I was very ungrounded and lived here as a kind of intellectual. This was like the safe place. Not really. That's what's a very interesting point. Is, all of this is to try to be safe. These are all ways, to be vigilant, to be knowledgeable, to be in control, right? It's all trying to be safe. It doesn't work. Doesn't work. Have you noticed? It just makes us anxious. It just makes us disconnected. It just takes us away from the intimacy of this here. So, lost in thinking, ungrounded. We can be lost in past and future, right? Ruminating about the past, worrying unduly about the future. Ungrounded. Okay. Doesn't mean we can't plan. We do, but we're not anxious about it. We can be ungrounded when we're lost in an emotional reaction, enraged, ashamed, right? Guilty. Interestingly, and these are emotional reactions. If we are open to gratitude, if we are open to an expansive love, if we are feeling compassion and kindness, we are grounded, moving much more into our ground. But what's interesting is, as open and as beautiful as the heart is, it's not the most stable center. You notice the kind of sensitivity, that comes with that, and how we may be shaken emotionally in relationship in particular. So caught in our minds, caught in our reactive emotions. We feel restless. This is more somatic. When we're feeling restless, agitated, when the bottom half of our body feels cut off and numb, we are ungrounded. Numbness. When we are feeling disconnected from ourself and from life, we are ungrounded. I could go on. I think you have your own variations, don't you? But I want to give you a flavor of this, right? So you're not in denial, like, oh yeah, I'm really grounded, and really your mind is a little bit quiet, I mean, that's helpful, I agree. Or you're in some story. If you're in a story, if you believe a story, you're ungrounded. If you think you're a separate self, you're ungrounded. If you think you're just this body, you are ungrounded. And it's a matter of degree, right? It's all relative. So let me flip the description now. What is it? How do you know when you are grounded? Okay, let's look at the other side. And the guided meditation was pointing us, you, to that recognition. When we feel grounded, there is an ease of being. We are at ease in ourself. When we are grounded, we feel a sense of trust in ourself and in life. And the two are not different. The two are not different. A basic fundamental trust in ourself, in life, no matter what. No matter what. That's a deep trust, isn't it? When we are grounded, there is a profound sense that all is well, no matter what. All is well. Even when horrible things are happening and chaos is afoot. That's an old English word, afoot. Kind of refers to the ground, doesn't it? We feel grounded when there's a sense of taking our seat in our inner authority. When naturally attention drops down to the lower belly and rests here with ease. This is the hara, the meaning belly in Japanese. And in Taoism, this is the dantian, right, beneath the navel and in the interior. We are and feel grounded when there is a sense of settling there and there's a sense of warmth, radiance, ease. We are grounded when we feel that we are here, that we have landed, and that this is good to be here. Interestingly, we feel in our body, settled. This is why I, very often my pointing is to be for attention to drop down and in. This is not about going somewhere else, right? And it's not about denying the reality of our physical body. Not at all. But we're settling into the core of who we are and the core of the body. It's like the gravity drops down quite naturally. And the whole sense of the body changes. We don't feel bound to the body or limited by the body. That's why I say the sense of here is actually not limited. It's like we are here, but this here is so open, we can't find the edge of it. And we are now in a moment that is so open, it is timeless. It's like the core of the body is a kind of this radiant core, this aliveness, and I'll talk more about this next time, is shared by all of life. We are grounded when we are at ease in a profound silence and stillness. Sometimes experienced as a darkness. But interestingly, as we learn to rest in and as this darkness, this dark mystery, if you will, mysterious because the mind has no purchase here, nothing to grasp. No thought, no definition can describe what this is. We also sense a luminosity. This is why I was using these paradoxical descriptions before. A luminous darkness, a vibrant stillness, a spacious solidity. Like the language is paradoxical, isn't it? But it fits. This is what people spontaneously begin to describe as this groundedness opens and awakens. It's like it feels so stable and yet spacious. It's so dark and yet it's so luminous. It's so profoundly still and yet vibrant, right? This is the best we can do. It's poetic, right? It's metaphoric. It's non-linear. It's not non-rational. It's more prior to reason, a deeper knowing. So this is a little bit of the lay of the land, a more specific description of the experience of ungroundedness and groundedness. And it's all relative, of course. And none of it is a problem. We are whole despite whatever conditioning we have. So it's very important not to get into a self-improvement project here, which the mind loves to do, whether it's psychological or spiritual. So how do we deal with our experience of contraction, of numbing, of freezing that we may sense in this lower half of the body, in our guts, in our solar plexus, in the lower belly, in the base of the spine? Energetically, we're talking about the root chakra and the solar plexus. Solar plexus, control. Root chakra, survival. Can you see how they're related energetically? If you can sense the body, you'll notice these centers. It's easier to feel the contraction in the solar plexus than in the base of the pelvic bowl, the root chakra. For some reason, I am wired to feel that quite easily when I sit with people. Maybe I have my own issues working through terror. I don't know, but it's very familiar territory for me as I sit with people and open to it. So how best to approach this? And for those of you who've worked with me and been on retreat or whatever, what I'll say is extremely familiar. And I probably mention this endlessly. So I apologize in advance for being repetitious. The best way, the optimal way to be with your conditioning, whatever your obstructive conditioning is in terms of opening to the ground, is from presence. Major point. Attune with presence as much as possible before beginning this exploration. And here I want to differentiate presence or awake awareness from mindfulness, present-centered attention. Present-centered attention is great, right? And the more open, the more curious, the more non-judgmental it is, the better. But this comes from the trained mind. We're training attention. And there will always be an agenda on the level of the mind to get an attachment to a goal, to get a result. Often hidden. Like, I will be mindful with my experience if I can get rid of it, right? If this will go away, right? Presence, on the other hand, has no agenda. This is one way we differentiate the conditioned mind, and even the well-educated mind from presence, awake awareness. Awake awareness accepts everything just as it is without an agenda. It has no agenda to change anything. It is a source of all change, All things come from and return to consciousness or awareness, awake awareness, but itself has no agenda. So the more that we can rest back in and as awareness, begin there, and then welcome whatever it is that's wanting attention, understanding, and simply observing what happens is very often enough. And there's a very natural alchemical process of transformation. It provides an optimal environment for conditioning to unfold of its own. So welcoming from presence. Presence is our greatest resource. It's always here. Very often we start from the mind. And there, psychotherapy does that for the most part. And it can be useful and helpful, no doubt. When we start from presence, it provides the optimal field for transformation. There are a few specialized methods within that that I think are congruent with presence that I often use when I'm working with people and that you can use with yourself. And I'll just name those briefly. And I spell these out in my book, The Deep Heart, in some detail. One is, once we're starting from presence and we're welcoming our experience, whatever it may be, a contraction, a numbness, an uncomfortable experience of some sort emotionally, we can breathe into it. In other words, this has a way of just inviting attention to be more intimate with the experience. We just breathe into it and breathe into the center. The center means that there's some contraction in the body. So the invitation is, without trying to change it, no efforting, simply breathe into it in order to be more intimate. And then just notice what happens. And there may be a question here like, oh, what's in the very center of this that I am breathing into? Very innocent inquiry accompanies this sensing. What's in the very center? What is this all about? What's in the core? See, it's not the language, right? It's not like some specific method. It's really curiosity, a willingness to be intimate with whatever this is. And then we just wait, we feel, we sense, right? And the other is to ask, if there's a contraction in the body, is there a belief that goes with this? Because this sometimes is what's keeping the whole thing in place. It could be something like, in this case, ungroundedness, it's unsafe to be here, or I don't deserve to exist, for example. And this is something that we've learned as a child, consciously, subconsciously. Right? And then we bring attention to the heart area, and those of you who are familiar with meditative inquiry, we just ask ourselves, what's my deepest knowing about this belief? That I don't deserve to exist, that it's unsafe to be here, whatever it may be. And then we get quiet, listen. So through these little methods that I've kind of worked out over the years, and I've been trained in many different systems, we are in effect inviting the light of awareness into the core of our conditioning, the conditioned body mind. This is the broader principle here. These are all means of inviting the light of awareness or presence or awake awareness, whatever we want to call it, to meet these conditioned areas. Or we could say it the other way. We're invited these conditioned areas into the light of awareness. Both are true. There's a kind of back and forth that happens. And in this way, we don't get into a self-improvement project. In this way, We're patient, open, kind. And in this way, these aspects of self, in their own time, will naturally open of their own. So you can see I've made it very simple. And this process of simplification is actually a distillation of decades of work, intense work with people and in my own psyche. So a final point before we take a break, which is, it's all good. We don't have to be perfectly clear of our conditioning. In fact, we never will. So please let go of that. It's fine to have contractions. It's fine to be frightened at times. It's fine to be ungrounded also. So please let go of that agenda to somehow be a perfectly embodied, spiritually embodied human being, because you'll never get there. And I've never met anyone who has. Yeah. Nonetheless, we can be open to our experience and we can receive it in this way as it arises.